you would please turn to Psalm 19. And you will see if you're turning to Psalm 19, if you have a Bible like mine, it is page 719. That's the cheat version, right? And if you read, it says, God's creation, to the chief musician, a psalm of David. I still hear the pages turning. It's like leaves rustling in the wind. All right. Okay, I think you're all there. All right. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Now, if you read, day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Just to give you an idea, I don't know when David wrote this, if he truly understood the placement, but I don't think that David even imagined, because there's other places where he mentions this, that somehow these placements in the heavens were random or accidental. Why do I say that? Because Psalm 147, just Psalm 147, 4 actually, says, He telleth the number of the stars, He calleth them all by their names. Not accidental, not random. And the prophet Isaiah actually says a similar thing. In Isaiah 40 and verse 26, he says, Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who hath created these things, that bringeth out their host by number. He calleth them all by names, by the greatness of his might. So you can see both David and Isaiah attribute all of this, which we look up and see, attributed to God. Okay, and we know that obviously in Genesis, we read they are for signs and for seasons and for years. So there's no question the stars are very clearly a revelation of some kind. And as we're looking in this series, I think it becomes more and more clear. We see that, when people talk about, are the Gospels reliable? How can they be trusted? I get frustrated with this. In fact, I had a little bit of a debate one time with somebody who was saying, well, they were actually Muslim, and they were making the pitch to me that the Quran is actually much better because it hasn't been changed, because it stayed in one language, and save that for somebody else. You may say, well, you're going to piss some people off. Yeah, I do, and that's the way things go. Save that for somebody else. That's like saying, nothing ever, no scribal error. Just save that. So if somebody wants to talk about the reliability of this book and God's unfolding plan of redemption and says, the scribes, and maybe they changed things, and maybe there's bias, and maybe it was made up. Friends, no one can alter what's in our starry heavens, okay? No one can go up there and start rearranging the stars to make it fit some other narrative. So just leave that one alone, all right? And even, let me go back to another psalm. Psalm 8 and verse 3 and 4, I believe. David again. He says, When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? So, to me, it's pretty clear. Even our ancestors somewhere in antiquity, knew this was God's handiwork, that God had by design. So let me digress for a second to Genesis 1:14. If you want to turn there, you may, but I'm not really reading the verse. We're talking about signs and seasons, but you may want to make some notes somewhere, and I'm going to write this out for you. In Genesis 1:14, I'm even going to turn there just to make sure I am not saying something out of place or character. In the beginning. All right. So, if you read, it says, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Now, this is important. Why do I say it's important? Because the first word there, if you have a Bible like mine, you're going to see 226. That is the Strong's number for the Hebrew word ut. The word for sign, if you look it up, a flag, a beacon, a monument, evidence. This word is typically used to describe awe-inspiring events such as the signs that Moses performed before Pharaoh. So don't confuse this. When people sometimes they read this and they think, oh yes, so different seasons or times, and they completely miss the Hebrew meaning behind these words. The word for seasons, this word, Strong's 4150, moed, mem, vav, here we go like this. All right, moed. So this word is not used in the Old Testament of a season like summer or winter. So scrap that idea. A lot of times we read too much of our modern linguistics into a text that does not permit that. So this word here indicated an appointed or fixed time. Let me give you an example. For example, Sarah was told God would return, but she would bear a son at a set time. That word belongs there, all right? The feasts of the Lord, those are set time. Moedim, the plural. Moed, singular, moedim, plural. So it's not seasons, winter, spring, summer, fall. These are set, appointed times by God for specific events to either be acted on or transpire. So the plural, when at the appointed time the children of Israel were to honor and worship God in his prescribed way, we could say moedim. The other biblical reference, I just want to reference real quickly because some of you, and I love, this is what I love about this congregation. Some of you will dig deep and you'll take something I said and you'll come back to me and say, explain, please. That's okay, all right? I don't shy away from that. So you've heard me mention the word mazora from Job. Let me write that out for you as well. So mem, zain, dresh, vav, tau. All right. It appears in Job 38:32. This is where God is speaking to Job from a whirlwind. It's almost like God is kind of at the end of the book here giving Job a little attitude adjustment, if you will, because he says to Job, now of course it's King James, and I don't think that God spoke King James English, okay, just saying. Canst thou bring forth the Mazorah in his season? Now, if you go look at the book of Job, in that passage, and if you have a Bible like mine, you'll see something in the margin. So if you don't know where Job is, before Psalms, right? So Job 38, and we should see it at verse 32. This is very interesting because you're going to hear me speak on some of these, but just take a look at the verse that comes before, verse 31. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazorah in his season? Now, if you have a Bible like mine, look at the margin 32 for Mazorah. It says the 12 signs. Okay? And if you want to take this one step further, because I like to show you things sometimes. Some people go, I don't know. So if you please come here. So this is Brown Driver Brigg, Hebrew and English lexicon. This one here is, don't know who published it. I'll tell you in a second. Okay. I'll give you the credit in a second. So if you look down here, you're going to see ma, so, re, ot, all right? And you're looking for what we see here. So there's other references here, but you see Job 38:32, where it's treated as, and then we'll see, perhaps understood as some particular star or constellation. You have to go to its cognate or its attached value. Right here, this word here, constellations, signs of the zodiac. You know, a lot of people say, where are you getting this stuff from? Well, it's in the book, all right? So just to show you that. I will elaborate a little bit more on this because I had some people asking me, can you give more information? In fact, somebody said, didn't one of the great archaeologists or pyramidologists write a book on this, and I'm not sure, I can't tell you. If they did, I probably have it in my library, and I'll go check. And if I do have it, I'll share it with you. But this word also occurs, this same word occurs in 2 Kings. So, if you don't want to turn, that's fine, but 2 Kings, and I want you to see these references, 23:5, I believe. 23:5, and at the very end of the verse of 23:5, where it says, "Them also that burn incense unto Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the planets." And you'll see those 3 lines beside planets, "and all the host of heaven." Look in the margin. And we have here again 12 signs or constellations. So lest anybody think I am talking about something that is cultic or outside the book, please pay attention, okay? Also something else. Somebody had said to me, do you think that when God created everything and he let Adam name everything, that Adam named the stars too? No, absolutely not. I believe God did that because God was writing his story, untainted, undisturbed, unmolested by anything that an individual human being could corrupt it to. So no, I don't believe that. Now, the reason why I bring this up just as a sidebar is because when you see this in the Bible, you say, okay, well, 12 signs, zodiac, constellation. If you remember, the word zodiac comes to us from the Greek. Zodiakos, circle. That's Old Greek. Modern Greek does not use this word. The other thing I want to point out before I get too far away from the mention of Job is that Job refers to, you heard me read in that passage, the several planets. Remember that Taurus, I'll probably elaborate in another message, but Taurus is associated with the Pleiades. So he mentions the Pleiades, Taurus is associated with that, and Scorpio is referred to in our Bible as the chambers of the south in the King James. So for anybody out there, because I had a couple of people say, well, this is kind of a really off topic out of the Bible. What are you talking about? What planet are you from? I won't say. All right. So we also know, as I mentioned last week, the mentions of Orion, the bear, and Hydra, the crooked serpent, from our scriptures. So each sign of the zodiac bears a name which most are familiar with because of the popularization of horoscopes, but each sign bears witness to the unfolding drama of redemption in some way, shape, or form. Now, these signs are, if they're not approached with clarity, and if they're not approached in the proper way, you can't see how this all comes together. So, I already showed you this, and I'm going to use the dark one. It's probably better. So you can see, we got to start in the right place. We have a circle, and you have to start in the right place to see the whole thing unfold. So we're starting with Virgo the Virgin, and if you make your way around, we end with Leo the Lion. We know that Virgo the Virgin is associated, obviously, it's a no-brainer, with the seed of the woman, the promised seed of the woman, which is according to the promise of Genesis 3:15, and Leo the Lion, which we have abundant references, but specifically, if you want to go hardcore on me, we've got abundant references out of the book of Revelation calling him the Lion of the tribe of Judah, all right? So there's not too much here that's ambiguous, but you've got to start in the right sequence. You couldn't start with Leo the Lion. If we're looking at the unfolding drama, we could make the case that before Leo the Lion appeared as from the tribe of Judah, don't think, as some people have erred and said, well, Christ is created later or born later, but not part of what came before because he was there in the beginning in the creation. This is my deepest sorrow for many of our Jewish friends who refuse, even though they read Hebrew, they refuse to read the creation specifically. It's laid out there. I mean, unless you fit the model of what the prophet Isaiah said, because you refuse to believe, because you refuse to acknowledge, I will blind your eyes, your ears you can't hear, and therefore you cannot repent. The reality is, it's right there. God didn't make any excuse. And the other error I want to just clear up right now is there are not two testaments. that are, some would believe this came and then this came later, and they're separated. You must read both testaments together. This is why, again, if you are of the Jewish faith, you have a big problem because your testament ends with a curse. I don't know about you, but that's not the God I serve. The God I serve makes promises that if you are faithful to him, not perfect, but faithful, the curse is past. Leave that one alone for right now. We're going to come back to that, not in this message, but we'll come back to that, because this has to be made clear for some that are very confused about end time and what they think will happen to certain people or what won't happen. This must be made clear in the Church of Jesus Christ so people understand this, instead of treating things all fragmented and apart. Everything must come together in the end. I've said this before. I'm sorry, I'm going to take a quick sidebar. I've said this before. If God was not forward thinking about the return of Christ, how could he possibly write in the book of Zechariah, "They will look upon him whom they've pierced and mourn"? Who did they pierce other than Jesus Christ? What person claiming or identifying or pointed to as Messiah did they pierce? It didn't happen except for Jesus Christ. So that's why I said there's a lot more to be said here. And I think once people get clarity, you start realizing that a lot of the talk and verbiage today that people engage in under the guise of anti-Semitism is nothing but a trick of the devil, because people are uneducated in this book and uneducated about God and make statements that if they really understood, man, they would backpedal so far they'd be in China, okay? All right. Sorry, but sometimes I try to keep my composure, but there are times when you just go, really? And these are people that are speaking to a large audience in ignorance. Okay, you've possibly heard me mention the zodiac of Dendera. All right. There's a great controversy around the dating of this, but I'm mentioning this because I'm trying to bring up loose ends of things I've mentioned that people have said, what does this mean? What is that? I'm trying to bring it all together for you. So the zodiac of Dendera, the controversy is that if you remember at the time that Napoleon, they were trying to decode the Rosetta Stone, and Champollion was the one that did it. It is around that time that a lot of findings become known, but they were known in antiquity and then forgotten. So this one was in a temple, and there's no one that can agree to the date of this, but most scholars, if you go with the late date, most scholars say this zodiac dates to 50 BC. Some scholars say it goes all the way back to 2000 BC. Now, hear me out, because I'm going to see something really weird. There's some interesting claims to this. Here's the claim. If you, in your time, everybody can go to the internet, we all do it, right? And look this up, and I want you to look at a figure that on this zodiac, remember I told you all, if you're looking at a zodiac map, we'll call it that, or a chart of Babylonia from the Babylonians, it will reflect certain things. All of what's here will be here with perhaps some minute changes. Each zodiac, though, does have the 12 signs, and basically with the 12 signs, each assigned 3 other signs to it, so a total of 48, but 12 with 3 attachments, if you will, which we've called decans, which are to the north or the south, but they are the cluster together of the constellation. Now, if you look at the zodiac of Dendera, something odd sits between Leo the lion and Virgo the virgin. It's a picture of the Sphinx. Okay, why? Because this is the great controversy, and I am not stating this, I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying that I believe this or not, I just find it interesting. Because most people have said the face of the Sphinx must be a pharaoh. It was bearing the royal garb, if you will. But there's good reason to believe, and please don't go, she's a feminist. I'm not a feminist. There's good reason to believe, many scholars believe it's the face of a woman and the body of a large cat, perhaps a lion. So I find it interesting that it's placed right between Virgo and Leo on this zodiac. Do with it what you will. I'm not saying anything else, all right? Just kind of putting it out there. I just think it's very interesting that there may be some connection there, and we may have just missed the boat because we're so fixated on digging to find, we'll call it the mysterious identification of the Sphinx, that maybe they were trying to say something in that zodiac that is just as plain as day, but we ignore it. Suit yourself and knock yourself out with this. All right, so I've already explained the constellations. So as we go in the circle, we're starting with Virgo the Virgin, and she, surrounding her, has, for example, in her decans are the Coma, mother and child, Botes, the kind of flailing armed warrior, if you will. So we're going to cover these. But before I do that, I do want to show you something, because I'm trying to tie up some loose ends so that going forward I bring a little bit more clarity. All right, so you got to indulge me here for a minute. All right, then we have, it's very hard sometimes to read my writing. If you were looking at the lineup of the camp according to numbers 2, it kind of, this is going to be interesting to write sideways, and you'll all be doing this. All right, Pisces. Sorry for the scribbles here. And I'm going to try and write a little bit smaller so it all fits in. Otherwise, I'm going to run into my toolbox. Okay, and here, Gad, Aries. I'm going to write the right way here. I'm no way that I'm going to write upside down. Okay, I'm good, but I'm not that good. All right. Except when I have to try and decipher some of your handwriting in the messages. There, I think, my God, there's a new language going on. I just missed the boat, right? I know you do your best, and God bless you, but some of you do write it's like hieroglyphics. All right. Forgive me, it's going to be really messy looking. All right, and to the bottom here, oh boy. Not upside down. Now, there's controversy about this because some people believe these two should be flipped. I do not. And here we have the Taurus, and reason to say 2 strong horns. But remember, I said to you, these are also attached to the tribes. And so I didn't make this up. This is, if you go back into antiquity, this was part of actually some of the Hebraic understanding of the zodiacs. We'll come back to that eventually, but I just wanted to put that out there so you could see that that's a thing, all right? Okay, we're going to start trying to bring things together, and I already know I'm not going to make it through the whole thing, but we're going to do our best, and hopefully this will have a little bit of, you know what? I forgot something. Sorry. That always helps, right? And this would be Libra, the balances. And I'll explain all of these in a minute. So let's go over here. And we are starting with Virgo. So I'm going to depend on you to try and follow me as I go through, because we've had enough exposure to this. We've got Virgo over here, and what is attached to Virgo, Coma, Botes. We're going to be moving down and around this way, and we'll probably get as far as here today. So instead of me coming over here every second, if I can have the director try periodically to cut to this, you don't have to stay on me, so that you can try and get reference to what I'm talking about. It's much easier for me than having to go back and forth, which makes it really hard for the listener, all right? Especially if you're not here in the sanctuary, it's even worse. All right, so we're starting with Virgo, 110 stars through what we are looking at, the promised seed of the woman, according to Genesis 3:15. Spica, the star in her hand, the branch that brings us the incarnate Son. The branch references are abundant. I chose some out of Zechariah. Just note them somewhere and look them up. But there are plenty and replete through Jeremiah and other places, Zechariah 3:8 and 6:12, for example, referencing the branch. We move on to Coma, the infant, That is mother and child. 43 stars bearing the meaning of the desired or longed for. The prophet Haggai says he will be the desire of all nations. So if you started trying to put together the story going in that direction, you have the seed of the woman. Actually, you could start at the promise given through Isaiah 7:14, a virgin shall bring forth a child, all right, and the government shall be upon his shoulders. We can make all of those connections, but we've got Virgo the virgin, coma, mother and child. And then, of course, Centaurus, which is a little bit to the bottom, just to make sure you know where you're looking. We're looking right here, all right, which is referencing the dual nature of Christ, all man and all God, all at once. In the Arabic, the meaning of this constellation is the despised, the same verbiage that appears in Isaiah 53:3. And you make all of these scriptural attachments, and then it just, all right? Botes has 54 stars. Where is Botes? Botes is right there. And you see, I also want to talk about this sickle I didn't reference. Botes, its meaning is the coming one. Inside the coming one, we see the star Arcturus. If you remember there in Job, we encountered that. Do you remember seeing that when I read the passage in Job, Arcturus? So what I'm trying to tell you is, you could say coincidence of one or two things, but when you start seeing them all line up, as I said last week, this cannot be any other than telling the story of God sending his only begotten Son in the battle between good and evil, the battle between the crooked liar, deceiver of the brethren, angel of light, fallen angel, the wicked one, the deceiver, the dragon, and God's power of goodness and light, righteousness, judgment. So, inside the coming one, inside Botes, we see the star Arcturus, the watcher or keeper, adjoining constellation, if you will, to it all belongs in that keeper of Arctos, the flock. In the oldest interpretations, Isaiah basically said, he who shall feed his flock like a shepherd. So all of these words, all of these stars that are on this chart, I didn't make them up. They are older than these images themselves, and they are telling the story. Many passages, in fact, you don't really have to know the Bible that well to know how many passages refer to Christ as the great shepherd, or himself in John 10 saying, my sheep know my voice, right? So everything there kind of ties back. If you look at the sickle in his hand, I just pointed that out, it's crazy, but he who reaps, Revelation 14:16 says, and he sat on the cloud, thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. I find it interesting, the symbolisms, even from one, for example, later on we'll see bearing a club, this one bearing a sickle. We tie all these various titles and names together in the constellation. We see the coming one, born of a virgin, who is the desire of all nations, having two natures, God and man, simultaneously. He is Emmanuel, the with us God, slain for our sins. So, in right perspective, I think we can see how this all works. So, I'm actually going to go to Libra now. It has 51 stars, and the balance, which we associate with a scale or weight, usually to measure out, all right? But in this case, we have to make the application to Christ, who tipped the scale, paying the price for us all. If we look carefully, the Hebrew name for this is mozanim, weighing scales. And part of this group also is the cross, which is down there. And that's also interesting because if I showed you the difference between this drawing, all right, it's like being in a car and somebody says, hey, could you read the map? Thank God we have electronic technology where you don't have to do this anymore. But I want you to take a look at something. In this map here, this is why I said they might all vary. the brightest star. So when you see the biggest dots, that would be, we'll call it of the first magnitude, and then they go down, second magnitude, third magnitude, and so on. In this one, you're going to see 3 that are about of equal size, 4, the largest one, and then 2 smaller dots. That's this map. Remember I told you they're all different. You look at this map, and whoever did this map decided there should only be 3 points and that major star right there. Okay, so that's why I said if you do a little research, you're going to see that many of these charts differ. And I'm telling you that in advance so you don't start pulling out your hair and going, what the heck, right? Okay, so the crux, the cross, this is representing the cross endured. And why I mention the number of stars, it's really irrelevant because when you go to a true chart, it will show you all the stars that are there, whether they are illustrated or not. But for the sake of conversation, I just like to point out whether you're looking at 5 stars or 4 stars. If you wanted to make this a biblical application, 4 is the number of the whole earth. The cross endured for the whole earth. Or 5 stars, the number of grace, that Jesus paid it all for us and the whole world, unworthy as we are, but his grace is sufficient. All right, so we could kind of tie that together, and I'm not going to make too much of it right now. I'm trying to do just a general sweep to bring the whole story together so that we're not fragmented as we were last week. If we move to the victim, which the chart has as lupus, 22 stars within, here is lupus. I told you some charts do not show a wolf. It just says simply victim. And some of them show a lamb, a sheep. It's something that died, something that was sacrificed. That's probably the best generic way to put that. So 22 stars within. And the image there is of voluntarily, not just specifically slain, but voluntarily, even though victim, laying down his life. And by his doing that, put away sin by his one perfect and final sacrifice. So just like the writer of Hebrews declared, once and for all. So when we say Jesus paid it all, it's not like these people that keep saying, we have to keep putting Jesus on the cross over and over again. No, he did it once and for all. It's done. Your job is to faith that he did it, trust in that shed blood, and walk in him, in the faith of Christ. All right, the next one is the corona or the crown. The shameful cross endured follows with a crown. Here, the Hebrew name of this particular, on this particular map, if you will, Atara, not just any crown, the royal crown, because there are many different names for crowns. Even we see this even in the Greek. I pointed this out a couple of weeks ago. You've got, I think, 5 different crowns. This is the royal crown. So I think it's interesting. If you go from Virgo, the promised seed, the coming one, you see the atoning sacrifice. He will weigh out justice in the form of the scales. We see the 2 stars in Libra, Zubin el-Ganubi, meaning the purchase price, and the second star in the balance is al-Gubi, heaped up, and a third star called Zubin Akrabi, the price of conflict. We know that Paul says, all of sin, I am constantly saying this and quoting this, Romans 3:23, and we humans are found weighed in the balance and found wanting. It's a part of our nature to look at this and say, can't be. But it's describing something. Now, hear me out, because I also made a reference to this. Reward and punishment is also in the balance. Now, if I tie it back to the tribes, I want you to think about this. The tribe of Levi wasn't given a banner or a standard, but they were keepers, essentially, of the tabernacle. And we'll call them the most priestly caste of them all, if you want to put it that way. Their job was basically to fulfill all of the prescribed sacrifices, presenting that atoning sacrifice for the people. It's almost like, again, some form of weighing out so that the wrath of God wasn't yet poured out. And again, we will see this at a future time. It will be. We're living in a day and age where you've got people reinventing the word, trying to, forgive my language, but bastardize the Bible, make it woke, make it a joke. Secret societies now that are emerging very cultically saying they are the 12 apostles, that the apostles of the Bible, they're past, we are the new 12 apostles, all kinds of crazy stuff going on. That's why I said, anybody who really is truly searching, I'm not asking you to listen to me because I have some special insight. I'm asking you to listen to me because I'm on the same journey you are. That is to get as close as possible to God, to better understand as much as humanly possible, and to not try and put myself into my bias, my ideas. I'm not interested in that. That's not going to save anybody. And when we kind of get that clear, we're smooth sailing now. All right, Scorpio. From the Arabic and the star inside Scorpio, Akrab. I'm not sure that you can see it here, but there is one star there we'll mention. Actually, there it is right there, I believe. There's another one, couple there. You can see them, the bright dots. Akrab or Al-Akrab, wounding him that cometh, actually. 44 stars, so you don't see them all, but 44 stars mark this sign, and we find a cognate of this word in David's writing of Psalm 144:1, where he thanked God for teaching his hands to war. It's very interesting when you start matching up the words to the Bible. It kind of brings new ideas. The book of Revelation also has something connected to it. In Revelation 9:3, it says, "And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power." What do the scorpions of the earth have as power? Right, sting, exactly. So this is not some weird creature, and the tail is in the position, by the way, to strike in this particular chart. Think on that. The brightest star in its tail, Lisath or Lisha, depending on which language you're getting it from, the perverse one. See, that's why I said to you, if you're really looking at this, there's no way this could be Krishna, couldn't be Muhammad, couldn't be anybody else but God writing the story of redemption here. In the middle of the star, in the middle of the body, there's a star called Antares, which means the meaning of the wounding or the tearing. Also sometimes called the heart of evil or the scorpion's heart. From the time before the seed of the woman, the coming one had now taken on, going forward, attentive human flesh. So the same spirit that had been at work to destroy God's plan from the beginning. Go to the garden. You got to start there, and you start reading forward. It's the same plan. It's the same mastermind. And a little work on this one will give clarity also to the stars. Where did we get the name Lucifer? From the Greek. And in the Greek, the name is phosphoros. Phosphorus. Phos, light. So remember, before he fell, brilliant, covered in brilliance, beautiful, and he got puffed up, right? But think about that, just even the concept of being so bright and radiant, phosphorus, and then fallen, taking a third of heaven with him. I think that this whole chart, when you see, and you're reading the Bible and you can see the work of the one who was light, who now comes as an angel of light, but is the deceiver of the brethren. If you can get that, you see a whole history of an attempt to thwart God's plan. From the garden, you move right to, we can keep going, but I jump all the way to the time, for example, of, as I mentioned last week, of Herod, where when it's told to him a child is born, and this child is basically being called the king, well, the decree goes out to slaughter every child 2 years and under, just to be on the safe side, you know what I'm saying? So who would do such a thing? Only someone with a wicked and dark heart. So I think you can see even into the New Testament, what happens after the baptism of Christ? What happens after that? He's tempted by the devil in an attempt, again, once more, to thwart God's plan. Because if he could get Jesus sympathetically to throw himself down or to do any type of abuse that he wanted to corrupt, God's plan would become almost null and void. The whole plan, you could say, well, crucified at the hands of the religious leaders and the Romans. But it's a plan that had to happen. These were just instruments to make it happen. Don't get into the mindset, as many people do, to say, well, blame these people. We'll blame these people. Read the book carefully. It's not that they came up with the plan. He said, no man taketh my life, I lay it down of myself, and he takes it again. Think of that, because our minds get a little warped and we want to look for, well, they did it. Yes, we all did it. But if you're reading the book, the religious leaders and the Romans, because a band together agreed, but it was what had to happen. That was what he came to do. He said many times. And yet we have to find something wrong in the story. So just something to really kind of wrap our minds around. So we're going to look at, in this here, the man who is holding the serpent. We looked at him last week. He should be right there. There he is, Ophiuchus, and the serpens, which, as you can see, is going for the crown. I'm going to look at that real quickly. We're going to see these two constellations together, consist of 134 stars, and I present them together for a reason, both the man, Ophiuchus, and serpens, the snake, the serpent, because to me, when I look at that, I'll tell you what I see. I see poly. Now, if you've been here for about 25, 30 years, you know what poly is, right? Yes. Out of Paul's writing, hand-to-hand mortal combat, that's what I see right there. I see Ephesians. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. That's what I see there. I don't see the image, of course. It's kind of a caricature, but think really hard about a strong man holding the body of a snake or serpents. So let's just put it this way. The mighty man, we'll call him the coming one, holding the snake, serpents, attempting to take the crown, again, trying to usurp, take what is not his. Again, we go back to the Bible, and you can see Isaiah and Ezekiel both talk about this attempt to usurp, all right? And then attached to this, very carefully, I want you to look at something. Scorpio, see the man's foot is on Scorpio, but the pincher is up. And I can't really say here, is the pincher going for the serpents, or do you think the pincher or the tail could strike the man? I think it was the tail in the position to strike the man, all right? So trying to wound or kill, and in the end ends up getting crushed himself. So the brightest star in serpents in the neck, if you can see it, Alia, the brightest star in the neck. So let's see where we can see that. And I believe it's right there in the neck. That is the meaning of that star, the accursed. The only reason serpents cannot take the crown is because he is being held back by the stronger, mighty man of God. Let's think of these things, because everything has the connection back to the Word. Greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. We can really see how Christ reveals his strength and power over these forces. You walk around all week long and you feel like you've been buffeted and everything's just kind of, you can really feel even sometimes oppressive forces. And you have to walk around claiming that promise, greater is he that is in me. If I am the temple of God, he sent his Spirit to dwell in me, greater is he that is in me. That strength is greater. It doesn't give me the strength that he has, but he gives me the ability to overcome. Think of that. We have here the final image of Hercules. Let's find Hercules. So where's Hercules? Hercules is right there. You got the club. He's upside down. Please don't turn your head. I'm going to turn the picture for you. Hold on, cameraman. All right, there we go. Thank you. I don't want to make anybody sick. There's Hercules right there. He's on bended knee. He's got the club, and he's holding that three-headed snake, which, interestingly enough, the bottom of it looks like it could be a branch of some kind with some leaves or whatever coming out of it. And I want you to look carefully at the whole, almost, when I looked at this several weeks ago, I was thinking, now remember, these are just depictions and kind of character drawings. Almost has the bearing of a John the Baptist, his clothing, but it's not, but almost has that view. Please, I just said that just to tell you what was in my mind. It is not. Mighty warrior on bended knee, who we might reference as the mighty victorious one. In his head, the star Aras, Al-Gathi, the head of him who bruises, and in his right arm, I got to say this right, coniferous, the kneeling branch. Come on. I mean, is it all coincidence? I don't think so. The star in his right elbow, Morsik, the wounding one, in the raised arm that's holding the club, in that arm that holds the three-headed serpent, Mason. These are all words that are names of the stars. The sin offering. And in the lower part of his right hand, Cain, from the Arabic, treading underfoot. All right. Sagittarius. I told you I was going to try and move through this a little bit quicker. Sagittarius. And we got to turn back, so bear with me. Here we are. Sagittarius. Again, dual nature, and I want you to pay close attention. Dual nature. Look for the brightest stars. He is definitely got bow and arrow. So if you have books on this type of teaching, almost unilateral, I told you, unfortunately, it's my gift to be able to read and know who plagiarized from who plagiarized from who plagiarized from who, and they all say the same thing. Pointing towards, they usually identify this with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Okay, let's leave that one alone. It's not that, okay? So please don't get confused. But Sagittarius, another dual nature, 69 stars, archer, ready to leave the bow to wherever it's going. Now, Psalm 64:7, God shall shoot at them with an arrow, suddenly they shall be wounded. Also, in this constellation, we have looked at Lyra the harp, which is usually associated with praise, rejoicing, and victory. Ara, the altar, these are all kind of strangely placed. So the altar is kind of strangely placed going down. And remember, it's a circle, right? It's going in a circle this way. It's face down. It's very strange that it's aimed in that direction, but it is. The altar symbolizes the ultimate judgment prepared for the father of lies and all of his cohorts. And you say that's kind of small. Well, that's what that is. And in that same constellation, Drago the dragon, they're cast down and defeated. The stars in Sagittarius, Naim, the gracious one, Nunki, the prince of the earth, from most likely the Akkadian language. There's fascinating verbiage of these stars that identify all this. So if you were telling the story, and you start with Virgo the virgin, who bears a child, the promised child, as I said, Isaiah 7, and you keep going around, you will cover virtually most of the most significant, we'll call them points of the Bible as you make the rounds. The winged harp, 43 stars, and it could be symbolic, but I don't think so. Let us be glad and rejoice. I will say unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. I think that image is in counterbalance with the altar, all right? So the winged harp. Now, I want you to notice something. I know this is a circle. The circle's going this way, but I want you to look at the images that are seemingly faced, and the directions that they're in actually matter. They will become relevant, and I hope to kind of bring you into more detail as I'm trying to cover these as much as possible and as quickly as possible. So, the winged harp, 43 stars, and the brightest star in the harp, or Lyra, is Vega, meaning he shall be exalted. Do you think whoever's putting these stars in the sky was thinking of Krishna? Don't answer. Don't answer. It's okay. But this is what I do think is crazy. If you go some passages in Revelation that really just kind of, they shout this all day long here. So how about this? I'll just read it to you. And when he had taken the book, some of you know I'm in Revelation 5 yet. When he had taken the book, 4 beasts and the 4 and 20 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. And if you can kind of understand, there has to be a connection to that musical instrument, rejoicing and praise. And it's not just any random thing. It's praise unto him. It's praise unto the Lord for his victory over these forces. You have it again, another depiction of this in Revelation 14:2. I heard the voice that was like the sound of harpers harping with their harps. It doesn't get more harpier than that. And in 15:2, the sea of glass, which is representational of people, the sea of glass is people, having the harps of God. So, then the altar or ara, the consuming fire prepared for his enemies, has 9 stars. The prepared fire, the Arabic al-mugamra, the finishing or making an end of things. And I think there's no accident here in all of these. If you were walking through and understanding the conflict that is from cover to cover in the Bible, it almost gives you the sense that God, who we talk about this often, and there's many people who are very polarized over this because our life is not wound up as some people say it's predestined, it's all wound up and it just unfolds itself. But God can predestine certain things like this. He can write things before the events happen. Why? Because he sees everything. He can see from before and he can see from ahead. He can see in every direction, in every dimension. So what we find very difficult to comprehend is easy for God. Draco the dragon, 80 stars in his name, and the meaning of his name, the trodden down one or the trodden one. And if you make a note of this and check it out in the Septuagint, which is the Greek version of the Old Testament, Hebrew Old Testament put into Greek, of Psalm 91:13, it says, the dragon shalt thou trample under feet. It's the same word being used as the star that's in the body. And I find that fascinating because it's not as though these words occur everywhere. So blatantly, when you start to understand the verbiage, you start to say, wait a minute, these are not common words commonly used, but they appear in certain places. The head of Draco is under the foot of the strong man Hercules, and there are some stars in the head of Draco, the Rastaban, the head of the subtle, and Itharis, the long serpent. The dragon is clearly identified with the serpent of the garden, and the dragon is being cast down. Now, whether this is the original casting down, or if you want to go into the book of Revelation to try and make those connections, it's irrelevant. We're talking about the same personage. And that just is a wonderful thing to know that God says, I already took care of it. Now, it's unfortunate that we have to be in the swill of things and duke it out, right? Ephesians 6. But he says, I've taken care of it. And I've also given you the tools for you to overcome, which we most of the time don't end up using, all right? That's our fault. There is a passage that kind of reminds me of many of these figures we've looked at today out of Isaiah 27, where it says, the Lord with his sore and great sword shall punish Leviathan, that crooked serpent. Kind of interesting verbiage, again, connected to this chart. I don't know if you're making the connections with me. Some of you have said, wow, this is really cool, and some are kind of like going, I don't know. I think I'm going to stop here for today. I'm kind of running out of time anyway. And we'll pick up next week moving forward. But if it's a little bit more clear for you today, the starting point is with Virgo the Virgin. You look at the decans that belong to each and every one of the major components of the 12 components, and you will see it's almost like God said, this is the main thing right here, so Virgo the Virgin, and what surrounds that main star or that main element we're looking at fills in the blanks and gives it the voluminous meaning that you find connected to the Bible. There are really good reasons to believe, if you're going to study this chart, that we'll see if it matches up to the ending of this book. We'll have to see if we're looking at it properly, but I'm just telling you this. It would be really hard, knowing all of the mother and child and all of the mythological peoples that you know. It'd be really hard to look at this chart again once you've been exposed to scriptural references to say it could be anyone else. And when God was writing the message, the drama, the unfolding redemption of humankind, knowing the dastardly deed of the serpent in the garden, and right to the end, bringing him to the lake of fire, him and his cohorts. You cannot look at this any other way than to say this coming one, Botes, with his great strength, who will reap the earth, and he did indeed sow, and he will reap of that which he has sown. You can't go through this whole thing and not see the dual nature, the battle, the conflict. And in this big picture, remember, I started out saying, I'm trying to show you Christ's existence. And you might say, well, how does this prove this? Well, I don't know who else this speaks of. If you can come up with somebody that checks every box and fulfills every single constellation, let's sit down and talk. But if you look at the names of the stars, and whether you look at them from the Arabic, or whether you look at them from Hebrew or Akkadian, or even some of the Greek verbiage, it's all saying the same thing. So at some point you have to say, God in his genius that wrote the story in the stars, knowing our perverseness, knowing the way we doubt, knowing the things that we waffle on, to say, if you didn't believe it here, look up, friends. No scribe could ever reach as high as the stars to move them out of their place or to rename them other than what he did. And all of that's to say, we look up and we see the glory of God, his plan of redemption, and the victory that is in Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. To be continued next week. That's my message. I'm Pastor Melissa Scott, pastor of Faith Center, Glendale, California. I teach every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. If you'd like to attend services with us, simply call the 800 number, that is 800-338-3030, to join us. If you'd like to watch, listen, and learn 24 hours a day, simply log on to our website at www.pastormelissascott.com.